Hey guys, what's up? Public here, back with another video, and today kicks off another video in the series for the Season 4 launch of Dragonflight. In this video, we're going to talk about Bullions, what to spend your Bullions on, what they do, and what makes sense as a Shadow Priest gearing up. We're doing videos kind of the rest of the week, launching Season 4, so be sure to check those out later on. But let's dive into Bullions. Alright, so this is your first time in kind of a Season 4 experience. We had something similar in Shadowlands called Fated. It's now called the Awakened Raid Season of Season 4. By participating in the season, particularly inside of raids, you're going to get a antique bronze bullion every week. You see it's this currency right here. And the way this works, you're going to get one every single week that the season is active, and you can actually purchase items from the raid from these vendors inside of Valdrakken, which are here in case you need to see that. Now, why this is useful is it lets you kind of fill out your gear much faster than you would in a normal season, because you can kind of go against RNG a little bit, or if you don't get something to drop or it goes to someone else in your raid, you can use these bullions to help fill out pieces of your gear with things that you didn't get. Now, keep in mind this is only for raid items, but you can choose between all three raids that are available, regardless of which one's actively awakened during that week. And like I said before, you get one of these tokens per week. You can see each of these items cost 2 bullions. So that means kind of as you're progressing the season, every other week you'll be able to purchase an item. And these are just kind of, as the season goes on, you'll continue to get more. At the end of the season, you can just kind of buy whatever you want. So you're not super limited to this over time, but earlier on, you're only going to have a few of these to do things with. So now the question is, as a Shadow Priest, what should you prioritize? Alright, so this season we have access to all three of these raid items, so one thing to keep in mind with this is actually how they have synergies with each other, and then also which of these might be contentious within your raid. So think of things like rings or necks, or things that are used by multiple classes and specs, especially if it's like a wide variety of melee and ranged or healers, because those items are going to be harder to get during raid because everyone else wants them as well. So in this list, I'm trying to take that into account as well. And again, if you didn't know, Icy Veins has all this written down as well, in case you prefer the written version. So the first thing I'm going to call out is not necessarily the first thing to pop up as an item to buy, but it's really important to know what this means for our gear. And this actually comes from the Vault vendor. So inside of Vault of the Incarnates, there are 2 cantrip rings, which means they have special effects that don't actually lower how many stats that they give on the item. The one in particular that's really interesting is called Seal of Diurna's Chosen, which is a heavy verse crit ring, so not our best stats, but it says dealing fire damage has a chance to ignite your enemies, burning them for damage every 2 seconds. Now, the reason why this is really important, because we didn't use this back when Vault was current, is because we have things that can actually proc this now. In particular, this season, you have 3 primary things that can be used to proc this. You have Vakash, the Shadowed Inferno, which is the one-handed mace off of Fyrak, which can be purchased with bullions. And you also have our Helm Enchant. If you weren't aware, we got a Helm Enchant and a Mirrodus roll, which will likely still be active this season. We haven't got anything saying it won't, which is also a fire damage proc. And the third option is the Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch Embellishment. So between these 3, if you can use 2 of them, you can actually saturate the proc chances of these fire damage effects pretty well. For most kind of top-end setups, this means you're going to be running the Helm Enchant and Vakash. If you don't have Vakash yet, you could consider running a Tempered Armor Patch instead, but at high-end setups, Tempered Armor Patch isn't the greatest in terms of output, and usually isn't worth it, so we're kind of more targeting Vakash specifically. So, because this ring is so strong, kind of the first top item that I would suggest thinking about getting is your Vakash the Shadowed Inferno one-handed mace. Now, the reason why you might want to delay this is because not everyone is actually going to be able to use this mace. It's not usable by, melee, for example, but it is a drop off of Fyrak himself. It might take you a second to actually get this. And again, because this unlocks other purchases down the road, this would be a good top item to consider getting as a Shadow Priest. The other caveat here is you need to get an offhand to use with this. Thankfully speaking, there are like 5 or 6 offhands this season with great stats for Shadow Priests. So we have offhands galore in both Raid and Mythic Plus. So it should be quite easy to pick up an offhand. Question is, how fast can you get this mace? Because once you get access to the mace, that's when we can go back to the Vault vendor and really start grabbing our rings. Now, like I mentioned, the Seal of Diurna's Chosen is a verse crit ring. Typically speaking, and we're going to do a secondary stat video later on in the week, these are not our best stats, but because this season we're just getting more item level, we're actually able to work out even perfect builds that have this massive verse crit ring, even kind of early on in the season. With, filling up the rest of our slots with haste and mastery to make sure that we're okay stat-wise. And then it just gives us a nice floor for verse and crit, which is always good. So this might be tricky to fit in a build early on, but hopefully your other ring choices or necklaces or neck item can actually really kind of add your haste and mastery that you need for Shadow Priest. Another ring to consider buying, not necessarily as a top choice, is the Seal of Filial Duty. This one is nice because it's kind of the opposite. It is a heavy mastery haste ring, so it's got great stats for us, and it is actually a fire damage shield that, again, can also proc with all these effects. So maybe not something to buy super early on, but something to keep in mind later on in the season. You can kind of pair these two rings together, which is really nice. Next up, something to consider then is really filling out your trinket slots at this point. So trinkets are kind of variable because there are a lot of really good trinkets this season. So this is going to be kind of dependent on what you want and what you like. One of the first ones that I would consider is actually from the Aberrus vendor, the Scales Associate here, which is Neltharion's Call to Suffering. Now, this trinket can be kind of RNG, but honestly, it looks really cool when it procs, and it is slightly higher item level than other trinkets, so it ends up scaling pretty well, and can be a really nice purchase from a Bullion perspective, because it can be upgraded to the top item level this season, making it particularly valuable. Now, Call to Suffering can be a little inconsistent. If you're looking for something more consistent with your trinket purchases, the other guys to consider are Whispering Incarnate Icon, which comes from the Vault vendor. Now, this one was kind of nerfed and tweaked a little bit. What it does is it gives you crit by default, so it's kind of like a crit stat stick, and then you can actually proc other effects based on allies that also have the trinket. Now, what's clear about this is healers and tanks are the other ones that can proc this. So if you have a healer in your group, they can proc you haste. If you have a tank that's using this in your group, you can proc versatility. The problem is, because everyone has access to a lot of trinkets, you might be hard-pressed to find healers or tanks that actively want to use this. But if you're in a scenario where you get at least one of them to wear it, this is a very competitive trinket for us, especially if you can get a healer to use it. Getting that haste and crit is super nice. The other one to consider is actually from Aberrus, which is the Ominous Chromatic Essence. This is again making a return. This trinket is similar to Whispering Incarnate Icon, where it really gets a lot of value when a lot of people are using it. And what this actually lets you do is pick the secondary stat that you get from it, and then everyone else that's wearing the trinket gets a smaller amount based on that amount, based on the stat actually that you chose. So if you decide to pick haste with this trinket, you're also going to give everyone else that's wearing the trinket a little haste buff. The important thing is that's actually not going to stack though. So in a raid group, you kind of want one of each stat. And if you can get that, this trinket's best in slot, basically. It's going to be really strong. It just might be kind of tricky, again, to kind of spread this out, especially in Mythic Plus, where you probably won't get a tank that wants to use this because they have so many other great options. So in Mythic Plus, you're max only ever going to get 4 of these. And again, really dependent on what other people want. In a raiding environment, though, it might be pretty easy and doable to get all 5 stats here. You just have to coordinate with your group what makes sense for you. Now, for Shadow Priest in particular, you can basically run any of the stats here, including the Obsidian, which is a little bit of all of them. If you had your preference, again, kind of depends on your gear and what your situation is. You're going to find that Emerald, which is crit, Ruby, that's versatility, or Bronze, which is haste, are going to usually be your top 3, depending on what you're doing. Kind of a full breakdown in the Icy Veins guide, but like I said, realistically, you can run any of these and get really good value out of it. So, something to keep in mind. Okay, and then the last item to think about getting with your Bullions kind of earlier on in the season is the Voice of the Silent Star Cloak. This is just going to be our best cloak in the game with this season. It is a slightly higher item level, which is nice. It is stealing secondary stats from your allies and giving you a proc of secondary stats. When it procs, it's really nice. It can be quite inconsistent because it does require them to actually take damage. And you're taking their damage, but hey, it makes your damage look better, so why not? So, and it's Season 4. You want to troll your group members a little bit. This is a nice item to consider. And again, like I said, this is going to just be a best-in-slot cloak for the season. Keep in mind, though, this guy does not have stamina on it, so if you're looking to push high-end content, you might not like that you're losing 2,000 and change stamina here, but for those of you that are just looking to chase high numbers, consider getting this guy. Okay, so as a Shadow Priest, there are plenty of other nice items here, but those are the top ones that I would consider. And again, the thing you want to keep in mind is use your bullions to fill out your gear based on what drops in the raid, and kind of take it week by week. You know, you don't need to plan out, okay, this week I'm going to buy this, next week or 2 weeks later I'll buy this. It's going to be dependent on what drops you actually get in the raid. Getting raid drops is going to be your first choice to getting these items, and then after that, fill things in with bullions. Okay, guys, hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for everyone for watching this video. We'll catch you later on in the week for other Season 4 content, and also catch me on Twitch occasionally. I'm streaming some alpha content for the War Within. And big shout out to all the Patreon members and YouTube members that support my content. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.